Okay, good. I think what we want to do is sort of take you through, the highlights of what's new in PDF 2.0 and just give you a flavor of the things that we as the committee have done to move PDF forward. And hopefully we'll give you guys enough time for questions and answers in case there are things, as I'm sure there will be, that we haven't touched upon or things that you have interest in and curious why they were or weren't addressed.
Yeah, please, if you feel like asking for clarification or asking a question, just do it right away. Don't wait until the end of the presentation. We're happy to take questions, and Duff will just bring the microphone so that everybody can hear you well. There's a couple of areas that are being revisited and reviewed and revised in PDF 2.0. It's actually an ongoing process still, and it takes much longer than we anticipated. So the plan was to be done this year, and I can tell you for sure it's not going to be done this year. It's probably going to be published as a new standard in 2015. So in about 2 years, that's the current planning, it will be published. That implies it will be finished earlier on because the final voting period on its own takes some time. So we hope to finish it next year. But that's kind of the timeline you're looking at here. Who of you has already looked at some draft version of PDF 2.0? It's quite a few people. That's good.
So the rest of you, when you need, if you're bored and you need something to fall asleep to, we highly recommend the current draft.
Yeah, so members of the PDF Association can get access to the most recent draft of PDF 2.0 over the intranet. If you don't know how to find it there or how to get onto the intranet, get in touch with me and I'll tell you. But I think those who have looked at the document probably have received it through the intranet or through their membership in the standards organization. So we're going to talk about various topics that we have collected here. I think it's about 8, so that leaves four of them to each of us.
Works for me, that seems reasonable.
And you see the order here, and then we'll just jump right into it and start talking about pre-press, print, graphic arts, and rendering.
Right. Well, you've been doing pre-press a lot longer than I have, so why don't you go ahead and start us up.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it, and then you can just jump in if you have something to add. Yep. One area that caused a lot of chagrin, I would say, in the last 10, 15 years is you can have a viewer that simulates the effect of overprinting objects on the screen, but not all of them do it in the same way. Not all of them do it all of the time, and there has been discussions around how to do it right. So overprint, I think, is a known concept. You can have 2 objects, and if you put them on an output device that uses physical inks, you can just put inks on top of each other. So you can have a yellow object and a cyan object. You print them on top of each other. They will appear green in the area where they overlap. Very useful in the printing industry. Online people don't care much about it. No. And the typical argument was that you have, let's say, Acrobat Reader, or Adobe Reader or Acrobat Pro, whatever, display it and looks this kind of green. You send it to a printing device, it looks like a slightly different kind of green. It's both green, hopefully, so not purple, but it's not the same kind of green. And some people care about this. They want to have a simulation of the ultimate output in a consistent fashion. We discussed this for a while. There is no official algorithm for that you can say that you take this many parts of this and that many parts of that and then divide it by 2 or whatever. There is a way that is kind of accepted by most. That's how Acrobat does it. We still don't know the exact details of how it's implemented in Acrobat, right, but we kind of know the general approach to it, like what kind of algorithm is being used. And so instead of prescribing a certain way of simulating the overprint effect on screen, for example, we decided to mention as an example one possible way to do it. That's kind of writing down the basic algorithm that is also used by the implementation of Adobe in the last years at least, if not forever. Right. As a kind of, if you don't know any better, you would use that one. Are you forced to do it in this fashion? No, you're not. If you are developing a high quality proof printing device and you have an even better algorithm because you have spectral data or whatever, feel free to do a better simulation of the overprint effect. So it's an example. It's not normative. It's informative. It's trying to enlighten you to one possible way of doing this. So that's may lead to a more consistent implementation, at least in viewers, I would guess. Yep. And maybe some lower quality printers.
Right, and more viewers just implementing this particular feature that has historically been a very Adobe-centric thing. We're hoping that more and more viewers can now implement it now that the generic algorithm has been described. So, you know, the more things, the more, and we'll talk a little bit later about some other examples of this, the more things that we take out of the Adobe-centric world and we bring to the standard and open world, the chances are greater, of course, that more people can implement it and implement it in a consistent way.
Right. Another item that we have been injecting into PDF 2.0 actually goes back to PDF-VT and the discussions in the PDF-VT committee. So PDF-VT, variable data printing, transactional printing, they tend to have print jobs where some pages go to one device and some pages could go to some other device. So some is glossy, full color printing, and some of the other pages are just black and white or cheaper paper or whatever. And still you want to have the pages in the same PDF file because they belong together. It's one document or one booklet or whatever. At the moment it's difficult to express that and say, well, this page is full color and this page is black and white only. Of course the objects can be black and white only. But if you wanted to do a simulation, like you can do in the context of PDFX and PDF-VT and also the other standards, by using the output intent, there's no way to do this for a document that has pages that are intended for different output devices. So we just use the output intent mechanism and define a way to make them on a page-per-page basis. This again you don't have to use it, but if you use it, that's a way how to use it and how to get it right. We don't actually expect wide adoption in terms of creating documents like that. It will be probably mostly happening in the variable data printing industry and related industries. Not the average print job will still continue to use the normal document level output intent. It's an addition. Again, it doesn't break anything. It doesn't make the file unreadable if you have a page level output intent, but it helps those that need to be specific about the output device on a per page basis.
And the other use case, of course, is aggregation. If you have two PDF files that have been prepared for two very different devices and you merge the two of them together into a single PDF, right now you have no way of maintaining the device centricity without conversion, and that, of course, leads to loss and corruption in some cases. And now you'll be able to maintain that original destination and targeting of the device.
Yeah, there's actually a disclaimer attached to it because you can only do it on the page level. There have been discussions to also do it on an object level so that you could have an output intent per form X object, for example. I argued in favor of that.
And I argued against that.
And Leonard argued against that. And so far,
I'm winning.
Leonard is winning the argument. We are not done yet. He was losing on other arguments.
Yeah, I lost other ones. It's okay.
And you run into this problem if you do imposition. So you put several pages on the same sheet. And if the incoming pages come from a color page described by a page level output intent, the other page comes from black and white based page, and you want to put them on the same sheet because in this instance you decide you'll just print the black and white on the color press, then you are possibly also losing some important information because the output intent does impact rendering. So especially once you go towards transparency, the page can look very different whether if you have a black and white or grayscale output intent as compared to a CMYK output intent. It was argued by Leonard and others that we are making things too complex because it would possibly have a heavy impact on rendering engines. If you do it on, like for every object, you could possibly do it, and then you do transparency, and this and that, an overprint simulation, that just gets too complex. And while I agree in principle, I was still fighting for it.
That's fine. Well, so, and as we said, standard's not done yet. Everything you're seeing here is potentially open for change.
Yeah, but act quickly if you want to see any change.
That's right, exactly.
Then we have ink attributes. So it's PDF actually originally I think was not really designed around inks. It was designed around presenting, around appearance. And only over time certain features have been added that let you easily address a specific ink. So if you wanted to have not just CMYK, but your very special orange or whatever, you could have orange on your printing press and actually decide that you wanted to print a certain object in that orange. So that's been possible for a long time now. It's an integral ingredient for any prepress workflow. But a few pieces have continued to be missing. And one is there's no way in PDF you can indicate in what order inks are printed on the press. And it does matter. Anybody in the industry will understand that it does matter. Whether you print the orange first and then CMYK, or first CMYK and then orange, whether you print black first or last in the CMYK print, ink order, and so on. PDF claims to be device agnostic, but we kind of went beyond that a little bit with our output intents. So output intents are a device-specific thing, so that you can kind of indicate what the page would look like if you actually printed it on that device, even if you don't have that device. Not everybody has a printing press at home. And in order to express that properly, it would be necessary to tell somebody whether orange is printed after the process colors or before, or what the order of the process colors is. You could not define this so far in output intent. You will be able to do so in the PDF 2.0 output intent. And it's just kind of naming the inks in the order they are printed, and they're kind of telling you the information that you have in the output intent is meant to be understood on the background of this ink laid out in order. The other part about output intents, and again, that would happen inside an output intent, is that you can CXF data. And that is a new upcoming standard. I don't know what the current status is of each of the CXF
I believe
parts.
it's in DIS.
So it's almost done. And it's an XML language that lets you encode all kinds of information about color, including spectral data. So far, PDF doesn't know anything about spectral color data. It only knows about tree stimulus data and single colorants. So you have RGB or LAB, that would be tree stimulus, or you would have inks like CMYK or spot colors. So that door is open towards spectral information. At this time, it's a for information only thing. PDF 2.0 does not describe how you are expected to use that information. It's only defining a kind of compartment and tells you if you have any CXF data, any spectral data you want to carry with the file, you can put it here. And we leave it to the industry, to best practice, or to future versions of other standards like PDFX, for example, to define exactly how to make use of that. So at the moment, it's just an option. It's not defined how you use that option. Again, it's not breaking anything. If it's there or not, it will not confuse any existing readers. But if you know how to make use of CXF data, you grab it and then do something useful with that. And last but not least, and maybe the most challenging one, is transparency. So transparency has been around since PDF 1.4, which was published in
2001.
2001. Yeah.
Right.
So a while. It's been around for 12 years. It makes the imaging model more complex, especially if you do it right. If you just do some of the easy parts, you can get away with not a lot of work. But once you really honor the 16 blending modes and the way transparency can be nested in transparency groups and so forth, including all kinds of color conversions that might be necessary, it's a major challenge to get it implemented well. There are not so many implementations that do it well, but there are some that do a pretty good job. There had been some discussion around how to really get it right. Some of that discussion going back to the Altona test suite by the European Color Initiative. There will be a presentation tomorrow talking a little bit more about transparency and Altona test suite and so on. But triggered by that, there was a meeting by 8 experts, I think, last year in July in Munich. It was a half-official meeting. And I think we had really the transparency intelligence in one room.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So it was the highest concentration of transparency expertise ever inside one room. People from different companies and backgrounds. And we discussed how to get the specification part of transparency right, because there were kind of some loose ends in PDF 1.7. You could do it this way, you could do it that way, depending on how you interpret certain provisions.
And we'll let Florian discuss those tomorrow, because Duff is letting us know we need to hurry up.
Okay, so details, oh yeah, I'm talking too much. Again.
That's okay.
So details tomorrow, but just to wrap this one item up, PDF 2.0 will be much more specific about these loose ends and will tell you exactly what to do when and how to do it possibly.
All right, let me take over for a little bit.
So we've been talking about prepress and prepress and prepress, and there's actually even more interesting stuff.
Oh, like good, it's stuff time.
That moves, that moves around, that doesn't just stick and rich media and so on. So what's going on here?
Yeah, so I talked about this a little, or I mentioned it earlier. So there's a new annotation type in PDF 2.0 called the Rich Media Annotation. And it was something that was originally introduced by Adobe and then adopted by the committee. And the idea was that previously, as I mentioned, we had one way of doing video and audio, and we had a different way of doing 3D, which was the old 3D annotation. And the problem was, by having them completely separate, there was no way to integrate them. So we were having customers who wanted to have 3D objects with video playing on the object while it rotated, or a video which had 3D interactive in it, inside of it, and there was no way to have the two merged together. So by creating a new single annotation type which blends the two, you can play any type of rich media, whether it's video, audio, or 3D, separately, or there are ways in which you can have the bits and pieces connect to each other. So playing a video on one texture of a 3D object is now possible with PDF 2.0. So very, very rich functionality that's now incorporated there with the new annotation type. And the other thing is something, again, that was originally introduced in Adobe products, and we had standardized as part of PDF 2.0, which are navigators. Now, those of you who are familiar with navigators in the Adobe products know that they're currently based on the dead and dying Flash technology. And so that, of course, is not something we wanted to see incorporated into ISO 32000 Part 2. And instead, for 32000, we created a concept we call named navigators. So users will now be able to get the same concepts and functionality, but not bound to that Flash technology that Adobe is currently using in their products. So we've created a nice open standard there while getting the best of both worlds.
Very good.
What else you got for us, Olaf? Oh, okay. So I have to tell you guys that not only does Olaf have this is something that is very important to Olaf, which is why I'm letting him talk about it. He hates what is currently in 32000 Part 1. So much so that he literally rewrote the entire chapter of the standard and said, here's a whole new chapter. We're now going to use this in the standard. So when you see your next version of 32000, those of you who are looking it over, this chapter is completely new and it's all his fault. So why don't you tell us what you were up to here?
Yeah. So I have the habit of joining all the PDF standards committees. I think I've been on all of them so far. I've been more active in some than in others. So I was very active in PDFX and PDFA. I was not so active in PDFE for engineering. I was hardly active on PRC, the 3D model for PDF 2.0, the new one. But PDF UA I kind of found interesting again. It was not at all my main area of expertise at that time when I started this. I didn't have any clue about tag PDF or accessibility or this and that. But I wanted to understand it. So I took PDFs back, PDF 1.7 as written down in 32000-1, and read chapter 14.8. That's the clause that you won't want to read if you want to understand tagging. And I read it and I didn't understand it. And then I read it again. I still did not understand it. I mean, I understand the words, but I didn't understand exactly how to create a well-formed tag PDF file, or how to write software that creates those files or understands and processes these files. I understood parts and pieces. I mean, I can tell a heading tag from a paragraph tag, so that was not the problem. But exactly how to do this and what to use when looked impossible. Some of the clouds went away over time when I kind of started thinking, well, what did the writer of the specification text think actually while writing the text and didn't write down? Like I was kind of identifying the pieces that were not written down, so I could make some sense of it. So it's not complete crap, but it's very difficult to really follow it and implement it in a clean fashion. And it's in some places it's even fully inconsistent. It says yes on one page and no on the other, and what do you do with that? I will not blame anybody specifically because it's a complex area. But at some point of time, I decided this should be cleaned up. So I asked in the committee that this be cleaned up, and there were no volunteers. This is a typical situation in standards committees. You can complain, but nobody volunteers to fix it. So I kept complaining.
And we told you you're going to keep complaining, do it yourself.
And then, okay, if nobody does it, I may have to do it, otherwise it doesn't get done. So that's how I ended up throwing away some precious days of my precious life. I hope it was worthwhile and you will not just complain about the next version. but I kind of rewrote it. So the core ingredients of the rewrite is, of course, I try to have much clearer language in most of the parts, but I also simplified the tagging model. So we have like 30, 40, 45 tags in the current version, and for some of them you wouldn't know which to use when. If, like, there's part and art and sect, which you use when is not very clear. So I just reduced that to one. So there's one semantic grouping tag, and all the others will be gone. There will be backward compatibility, so you can still use them, and then just have a role mapping just to the new tag. But it's getting much simpler. I have also thrown out a couple of the layout attributes and stuff like that were only used by very few implementers, and it was never clear exactly how to use them. So it's been revised. So it's simplified. I hope that the next generation of readers will find it easier to understand that chapter. The other part is we added an extension mechanism. Because we were kind of dumbing down the tagging system, so to speak, we made it more difficult to be specific. If you wanted to have some tags that tell you in a more precise manner what a certain piece of content is about, it would become more difficult. And just having custom tags and map them to via a role map to the standard tags would not help as much. And in order to facilitate recognized systems of tags that are not already defined by PDF 2.0, we designed an extension mechanism. Actually, it goes back to Matthew, who's sitting to the right from me. Who kind of designed and wrote down that part. So it's not all just me doing work here. It's a very important system. You could use MarthML or Daisy or just about any other semantic tagging language. Use it inside PDF, and just for each of the custom tags, define how it's mapped to the standard tags. And based on the namespace mechanism that we're using, you could actually identify it instead of second guessing. And there's some parts that we're still discussing. So I had the idea that it should be possible to nest documents. At the moment, you can only have kind of one document inside a PDF. But if you have two documents and you turn them into one PDF, well, I think you have two documents inside one PDF.
And Leonard disagrees with you, but
anyway, so in this case, it looks like I'm winning the argument, essentially. But we will leave the details out here.
Yeah, details. Yeah.
So there's going to be some tags that kind of say, well, if you kind of use them in a certain fashion, it points to the fact that the two original documents have ended up in the same PDF document. An argument I was losing was on sentences. I wanted something below the paragraph level, but not down to the word level. And so I was looking for sentences. That has been turned down so far. Yep. We introduced heading levels beyond heading level 6. There are actually documents that use more than 6 heading levels. We also introduced a title tag, which has surprisingly been missing from the current PDF specification. So it's all kinds of bits and pieces that have also been added. So anybody into tagging, into accessible PDF, into PDF UA, into repurposing, useful repurposing of existing PDF documents based on tagging should really look at this and figure out how to do this. Again, it's not breaking anything. There's mechanisms to make the current way of how you use tags compatible with the new way in PDF 2.0. Which brings us to yet a completely different area. Like it's one of the areas I tend to avoid. That's why Leonard is taking.
That's why I get that one. Yeah. So and I also get this one being the editor for PDFE. So there's a couple of things we did. We've talked about the rich media annotation already, and that ties into a new format for 3D, which is being done as a separate standard. Called PRC, and in fact there's a whole session on that later today. So if you're into 3D, I certainly recommend you go and listen to that. It provides for smaller 3D with a lot of additional capabilities beyond the current U3D format. The two other areas that were introduced in PDF 2.0 for engineering, first is geospatial or GIS type data. So you can incorporate very specific location information both in two-dimensional data as well as three-dimensional data. And that uses the standards in the field. We didn't reinvent anything. We just figured out how to take the standards of geospatial and integrate them with the PDF 2D and 3D imaging models. And then in the same vein, if you can describe something in physical coordinates, you know, that this is at this latitude and longitude and this is at this latitude and longitude, then it would also be useful to be able to measure those distances as well as other distances. And so there's a new concept called a measurement property. And this also works in both 2 and 3D. And it's a very rich, extensible model so that you can basically put a scale, if you will, in your PDF. And you can say, this many user units in the PDF file in 2 dimensions is equivalent to this real world unit. So you could say every 10 user units is a millimeter. And then you can describe that there are 10 millimeters in a centimeter, you know, up to meters. Or for those of us in America, we'll talk in inches and feet and miles and the like. Or you can make up your own units. You don't even have to use real world units. And so it's a very rich way of enabling people to describe physical attributes inside of the logical attributes that we have within PDF. So we're seeing a lot of growth in this within the engineering space. All right, where else are we going from engineering? Oh, back to semantics.
Yeah, but semantics. But it's not tagging semantics in this case. It's some other aspects that improve or increase semantic aspects of PDF. The first one, depart. Who knows what depart is? Yeah, I expected that. It's very specific, currently at least. It was actually invented for PDF VT, the ISO standard published in 2010. For variable data printing. And they tend to have files like with 10 or 100,000 pages. And to find the right page, you need some mechanism. You could think of various ways. You could start as text search, of course. May take a little bit if you have 100,000 pages. But some people need something more structured. And what you can actually do based on depart, you can attach metadata, and in this case it's not normally XMP metadata, it's like just dictionary keys and values. You can attach metadata to pages or page ranges. And you can do it in a hierarchical fashion. You could organize your pages according to, let's say, country, zip code, and street name, for example. So the country, of course, would be the top level metadata, and it would kind of point to a range of pages where some of the pages belong to this zip code and the other range to the other zip code. And by means of that, it would become easier to get to the right page in a much more quick fashion than you could otherwise. And you could also, we did that as part of the PDFVT standard, could define an integration with JDF, the job definition format for driving printing processes, and have XPath-like expressions that would say, well, get me all the pages for zip code this and that, as opposed to saying page 17 through 908 or whatever.
Now, it's not, although that's for what it was invented for, we've actually seen a lot of interest in using departs in other spaces. For example, we were talking about merging documents together. You can use depart so that you can easily identify where all of the original documents were during an assembly, because you're grouping those pages together. It's also useful for doing page level metadata, as Olaf said. So for things like if you're doing a scanned document and you have to add in what are called skipped pages, where you want to skip things or they've got barcodes or special things, you can now identify those pages using the depart metadata model. And then now there's a standard so everybody can use the same thing and we can all easily identify skipped pages, barcoded pages, and the like.
Yeah, so it's a good mechanism to kind of organize your pages in semantic fashion beyond the mechanisms that we know already, like page numbers and what have you. The second item on this list is associated files, and it takes embedded files one step further. You could already, I think, forever in PDF, or at least
1.2 or 1.3.
Yeah, for a very long time, we have been able to just put any kind of file inside a PDF file. You could do it with a file attachment annotation, where you actually have a visual representation of something on your page pointing to the embedded file, but you just have it without any visual representation on the page, and the software that you're using would have to point you to the presence of this file and provide access to it. The downside of this mechanism has been you are not able to tell anybody what the relationship is of that file to your document, or maybe some content in the document. So just look at one case where you have a business graphic, a bar chart, and you decided to put the Excel file that you used to generate the bar chart to embed the file inside the PDF. There would be no mechanism today to say, well, this is the Excel file, and I used it to create the bar chart. And with associated files, you can. So for one, you cannot just only embed files. You could do this forever. But you could also express what the kind of relationship is. Is it the source of content in the PDF file? Is it an alternate representation? If you had an audio recording of all the text in your PDF, that would be an alternate representation. Is it some related data? Whatever. You could express that. You could also define to what this embedded file relates in the PDF file. Is it the whole document?
We're getting the flag again to hurry up.
Okay.
I'm just letting you know.
10 more minutes.
I understand. I'm just telling you, Duff's
Okay.
getting anxious
nervous
over there.
Yeah. Okay. So you can say, well, this belongs to the whole document, or it belongs just to a part of the document. You could associate it with a page, or with a formax object, or even with a node in your tagging structure. So there's all kinds of ways you could associate the embedded file and information with something in the PDF file. And then the third one I mentioned already, we decided to deprecate the info dictionary and instead focus on XMP-based metadata. It was quick.
Yep, good. Okay.
Again, this is one item
yeah, this is
that
another
I
area
tend
you
to
don't
avoid.
like.
I just don't like it. And that's why Leonard is taking it.
Yes, and Leonard spends a lot of time on this one, and in fact, I have a whole presentation, I think it's tomorrow, on digital signatures. There's a whole session, so I won't spend time now, but the key point to take away is that we have aligned the work being done in the European Union in the area of digital signatures, a standard called PADES, PDF Advanced Electronic Signatures, and we've taken all of their work and we've now incorporated it into PDF 2.0 so that the European Union standardization efforts and the PDF standardization efforts are completely in line with each other. And that should be obvious as to all the benefits. And we'll go into some details tomorrow, myself and Bruno, into the details of this PADES standard and how it impacts PDF. So we'll tell you to come tomorrow. The other thing, of course, is just in the area of encryption. There's a new encryption algorithm that uses stronger encryption itself, just a newer version of the AES algorithm, and also improves the way hashes are generated so that it's much harder to use brute forcing to crack the files, and so that's certainly of obvious benefit. And I think the next area is something that, you know, I keep telling Olaf, this is the one I should present, but he thinks it's better if he goes and tells you about what Adobe has been doing, so after you.
Yeah, so speaking about it doesn't actually mean I'm an expert in JavaScript or rich text or FDF. I'm not, actually. So I will have to leave the details to Leonard. But there is important parts of the PDF specification ecosystem that are not themselves ISO standard at this moment. So for example, there's JavaScript, very important if you do interactive PDFs and interactive readers. The spec is open, it's not hidden, so you can implement something, but formally it's currently under control of Adobe. Adobe could just design a new version of JavaScript for Adobe Acrobat or whatever, and then you'd have a new version. And it felt more suitable or more natural to arrive at a state where something like JavaScript would also be controlled by ISO. Not that Adobe would screw up all the time, but it's like, it just makes more sense if everything else is an ISO standard to just have that as an ISO standard. And the first approach to this was to actually put JavaScript inside PDF 2.0. But then some people were complaining, and instead of 1,000 pages or whatever, you would ending up with 1,300 pages, because I think it's 300 pages for
it's a huge document by itself.
Yeah, it's not necessarily as complex as the PDF specification, but it's a big document. And it was rather decided to have it as a separate document and reference the ISO version of JavaScript from PDF 2.0, if you can manage to get our act together by then.
Yep.
And the same applies in a similar way to rich text, to ways to have text inside a PDF file, but with some formatting information, and to FDF for exchanging information related to acroforms. Right,
that we already, FDF is already in 32,000 Part 1 today, and we realized that the XML serialization of that XFDF had never been standardized as part of 32,000, and so we wanted to make that happen because they really are the same thing, but just two different serializations. So as we said, the goal here is to make as much of PDF and the PDF ecosystem and what people normally associate with Adobe Reader open to everyone so that more people can participate and then we're all on equal footing.
And I suggest, if you have the chance to look at these documents, even if it's not the most exciting literature you can run into, if you don't mention your concerns or needs at this moment, then it will be finalized probably as it is, and then you'll have to live with it. That applies also to, for example, the digital signature stuff and encryption and so on. So if you are active in this field, have a look. Let us know if you're not happy with some of the implications of that, because otherwise you will have to implement it in the long run as we specify it.
Right. And with that, since stuff seems to be, and there are other things. We have another slide or two, but no, that's okay. I think the key thing is we can talk through some of this other stuff, but ask the questions. What didn't you hear about, or which one of these things do you think we shouldn't be doing, or anything? So, Duff, why don't we go ahead and open it up for some questions? I can see everyone's just jumping to get that microphone from you. I can't believe there aren't any questions.
No questions?
Great, we did such a wonderful job.
Yeah,
nice job. Very
good job, yeah.
You all don't care, or what's the other alternative? You're sleeping? Who has a question?
They're ready for lunch.
Maybe very brief or quick question.
I know.
What is PDF Association going to do to help companies like we are to adapt all those features very quickly? Because that goes back to what you, Leonard, said in the previous discussion or your keynote, that companies like we are, for example, simply do have our own business models or business demands, whatever it is, and at the end of the day, it used to end up like PDF 2.0 is out in 2015, and we would start supporting it in 2017 perhaps. So first question, what shall we do to be as quick as possible out there? If there is any, I don't know, priorities we should follow, let's say, and what PDF Associations is going to do to help us and to help all of us to be as quick as possible.
So let me take one part of that, and then I'll let you take the other part. So one thing we didn't mention that actually didn't come up in either case, and sort of goes back towards my keynote in a sense, is so in the current 32,000, there is a concept which was actually adopted from the subsets called a conforming reader. So what does a reader, what does a consumer of PDF have to do? What is required? When it says shall in the standard, what do you have to do? And there was a lot of debate, and there continues to remain a lot of debate on what is the minimal acceptable set of functionality for a reader of PDF. And the fact of the matter is that we can't agree on what that is. And so what we've done in 32,000 Part 2, rightly or wrongly so, and as I said, this is still in huge amounts of debate, is we've taken out every reference to the concept of a conforming reader from 32,000. So that the fact of the matter is that a reader does not have to actually implement a single thing. I mean, and can still be a conforming 32,000 Part 2 reader. So you actually don't have to implement any of these new features, and you would be perfectly fine in what you do. Now, I'm simplifying things because we're late and we can talk a little bit more about it. But just to give you one point of interest, and I do want Olaf to talk about how the association is going to help here. From a requirement standpoint, you don't have to do any of this. And I will also say that also applies to Adobe. We are not required in any way to do any of these new features. And that there may come a time when Adobe Reader does not implement every feature in 32,000 Part something or other. That's not a product announcement. That's just a general point that it's now up to everybody, that everyone is on equal playing field at this point, ourselves included.
Yeah, and actually the problems go back there. There's all kinds of PDF readers. It's not just interactive PDF viewers. A PDF printing machine would be a PDF 2.0 consumer because it would just be printing PDF documents. A text extraction tool could be a PDF 2.0 consumer, but it just is interested in text extraction. It's not interested in rendering, so why should it follow any rendering? And this goes on. Metadata extraction would be a very simple case. You just are interested in document title, nothing else. You would only implement a very specific part that has to do with metadata in the document. Everything else you don't care. That made it so difficult to come up with a good concept. Or a pre-fighting engine that kind of just does things differently because it's useful. So that made it very difficult to come up with a conclusion here. And so the only thing that's kind of there is we define the format and possibly how to write the format. And very often we say, you don't have to write tag PDF, but if you decide to do that, if you want to write down tag PDF, you have to do it in this fashion. So we are not forcing you to do it, but if you do it and you want to be compliant with PDF 2.0, you have to do it in a certain fashion. So now how is the PDF Association going to help this? So one thing is we are already enabling our members to get access to the document very early on, even if you are not a member of a standards organization in your country. That would be the normal process. So you can read the documents while they are being prepared. You can join ISO meetings as a member of the PDF Association. So we had somebody from Russia there in Vienna, and other people who are not formally members of their country's standards bodies. So we can enable that, and we are very grateful.
You can send comments in.
You can send comments. You can contact any of us, like Leonard, myself, Duff, whoever, and say, well, I'm not happy about this. And even if you can't take your concern personally, we may direct you to the right person to get the ball rolling and to have the impact that you are looking for, probably. We may sometimes ask for more input and some work to do, so write down what you need or have in mind, so it doesn't come completely free sometimes, but it can be done. And then once we get closer to finalization of PDF 2.0, probably during next year, I would guess, I think there will be some members of the association that will start working on education material and education events. Some of these targeted to developers, not necessarily to end users. So we may have events on how to render in the PDF 2.0 world, getting color right and transparency.
And we already have some of that here today and tomorrow.
And some of this is happening.
We have a whole session on digital signatures in PDF 2.0, great presentation on transparency in PDF 2.0, tagging and structure, and some of these things are already being addressed here today. And tomorrow we'll address them in North America for the North American folks in August. And as Olaf said, I expect we'll be back somewhere in Europe next year and continuing with more details and more education.
And if pieces are still missing, like you could think of profiles for viewers, like they might be different on a mobile device with a smaller CPU, and then they might be more demanding on a professional PDF display device. So if that would be something on your mind and you think it should exist, then just bring it up, get in touch, and hopefully also join us in our efforts to get it and to make it happen. So it's a lot of things are only happening if somebody's doing them, and so it always depends on personal involvement and volunteers and so on. So it can be done. We're very open. Get in touch. We do even more than what we're doing today. Yeah.
Good.